Well, the one thing, the boarding schools is kind of a good case in point because there was a long period of time where Native kids were sent to boarding schools, and there were some really, really awful experiences. And then there were, particularly, I think, later in some of the boarding schools, the experiences were not as bad. There are some Native people who felt that it was helpful to them because they, in essence, got an education. Right? They may have been the family life may not have been that great or whatever. By and large, I think probably a lot of the kids it was not a good experience for. So it's trying to kind of go down the middle and say, as with most everything, there's good and bad. And part of it had to do with the non-native people who were running the schools, and whether the state was running it, the federal government was running it, whether religious groups were running it, so that's the way I feel. I feel we tend to not be maybe as negative as we might be because you are trying to show that there's two sides to everything. It's the same with the Revolution exhibit, right? I mean, basically, we didn't know what we were going to get from the artist for the Revolution exhibit. And generally speaking, it's focused on things like the Sullivan Clinton expedition, which was not a good thing for Native people because they basically burned all of their food and their dwellings and all that kind of stuff. And then, but then there's one, which is a box. It's a beaded box. And basically what she's saying is it's holding the culture in essence. So there's that kind of continuity of yes, these awful things can happen, but we're still here and we're still hanging on to who we were. And that's kind of cool. So there's always that two sides of things. And
and the boarding school exhibit was created
by a Mohawk woman whose family was in boarding schools.
Yeah.
And did not have an awful experience, but did not have a great experience in boarding schools because they were a long way from home. They were sent basically across the state, and so that's kind of cool too, is to bring the contemporary Haudenosaunee voice into the exhibit, which we often try to do. It's talking to even if it's not a guest curator, it's talking to people that we know and say, okay, we're doing this exhibit. What do you think? I mean, a lot of times even just picking up the artwork for this exhibit, you talk to the artists about what they were thinking when they made it. We have a really beautiful basket, but the basket is about the Sullivan Clinton campaign and about the destruction that went across the state. But it's a beautiful basket, you know?
And with the boarding school exhibit too, it's now what are we doing with those buildings? How are we getting over this generational trauma? What do they need to rise above it now? And what are the children doing, and how the children are doing much better than the parents did compared, doing better, every generation doing better.
Yeah, and the language is a lot of it because when you went to a boarding school, you weren't allowed to speak the language. And so now there's a real push in a lot of communities to get that language and keep that language and bring it back. So that's all kind of cool. So it is that sort of reaction to something bad that comes out with something good.
And that's an extraordinary day too here at the museum when the Freedom School and the other schools on the reservations come and the children are all running around speaking Mohawk or Seneca or whatever. And they're, the exhibits aren't really, they go through the museum looking for people that they know.
Yeah, that's a fun,
which is great.
Yeah.
And then they're like, that's my uncle, that's my cousin. And then they're like, oh, look at that. And they're all speaking Mohawk, and then they'll turn to you and speak English, and then they'll turn back and speak Mohawk the rest of the time. And that's fun. Or pictures of teenagers that come in and they're 5 or 4 in a picture on the wall. And they're like, that's me. So then we take a picture of them now compared to when they were little. So
yeah, so it's cool for the Native kids to come too. Yeah.
Yeah.